Now for our politics panel. Dan Balz is chief correspondent at the Washington Post. Michael Scherer is Washington bureau chief at Time Magazine, which ran a controversial story on Donald Trump this week. He's melting down there on the cover. Audie Cornish is host of All Things Considered at NPR News, and Michael Gerson is a columnist of the Washington Post. Dan Balz, I want to start with you. You wrote, if Donald Trump were deliberately trying to avoid winning the election, he could hardly be doing a better job.
Well, I think the reason for that is that this is a change environment, excuse me, in this election. And by his own actions, Trump is drawing attention away from the vulnerabilities of Secretary Clinton onto himself by one controversial statement after another. And there's a pattern to that. I mean, the pattern is he makes a statement, there's several days of damaging coverage, he rolls it back, he sort of doesn't roll it back, so he keeps the story going, and in some ways, he creates another diversion to get out of the previous diversion. So he is not focusing on the things that he might focus on if he were to really be serious about trying to win this campaign.
Michael, in the piece in Time, in the interview with Donald Trump, several times he seems to go, he says, you know, my advisors want me to behave the way Dan's talking about, a traditional campaign, doing the things you're supposed to do, prosecuting the case against your opponent and staying on message. And it's like he's wearing an itchy shirt. He keeps trying to get out of that and be himself. And today he tweeted, "I am what I am."
Yeah, what he told us was, so far I like the way I ran in the primaries better. Even though he's not running in the primaries, it's a different electorate, he has to run differently. Trump is caught here in a vice. From the beginning, he has always trusted his own gut. And his gut did something that pretty much no one at this table or no one in Washington thought he could do, which is win the Republican primary. And he was proved right. The problem is it's not going to work a second time. And he, in order to start running a more disciplined campaign, has to work against his own instincts. He has to stop talking about himself in a race in which both candidates are way underwater and the country doesn't like them. If you're talking about that candidate, they're probably losing. He needs to focus things on Clinton. It's very hard for him to do. And he needs to find a way to keep his brand, which is probably more important to him than winning the election. The idea that Trump is who Trump is. And cater it in a way that doesn't turn off a majority of the country, which he's doing right now. And he's struggling. I mean, in our interview, he was struggling. If you see him at rallies, he's struggling. He's like, it's almost like a public therapy session he's having with the American people now, in which he's trying really hard to figure out how he can become the candidate everyone's telling him he needs to be without losing the person he clearly loves very much.
Right. Audie, where do you think we are in the campaign? Newt Gingrich compared Donald Trump to Harry Truman in 1948. He was saying, you know, he's an outsider candidate, he's a scrappy fighter, he's not doing things the traditional way, trying to conjure memories of, you know, Dewey defeats Truman. In other words, the great comeback. Is Donald Trump in that bad a position? Is he in need of a big comeback, or is this just a temporary little hiccup here?
I think he's still playing to the rooms where he is most enjoying support, right? He's still playing to these people in the rallies. I don't know if Donald Trump has met a voter who is ambivalent, undecided, needs convincing, right? He either talks to people who are hostile, protesters, the media, biased and also hostile, right, according to him, and people who love him. So I think he has zero concept of what to do with people who need to be convinced. And so his sense of needing to turn it around, I think, is not there. Experts and people in Beltway can certainly sit around and say, wow, he's really got to do X, Y, and Z. But he looks around a rally and a room full of people who adore him, and he says, why shouldn't I stick with my gut?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's even more complicated than that, because he has not solidified Republicans in the same way he needs to. Hillary Clinton, you know, faced a tough battle with Sanders, but she's 90 plus now among Democrats. Pretty consistently, Trump is in the low 80s. He has to change that in order to be competitive in this election. A lot of those people are Republican women, a lot of them college educated, who he is not appealing to in any way, in fact, driving them away.
Dan, there was reporting this week about a letter written to the RNC from 70 Republicans, strategists, some who'd been in the political game, some were not so recently, saying, well, the RNC should cut Donald Trump loose and focus on the Senate and House candidacies. That's not that easy to do, is it?
No, it isn't that easy to do. I mean, it's premature. I mean, we're only in August. We're not in late September or mid-October, for one. And as people within the party who have experience with this will tell you, if you start to do that now, the money's going to dry up. Donald Trump is helping them to raise a lot of money. And if they say, well, we're going to take it and send it elsewhere, he's going to say, well, we're going to stop raising money. So the resources won't actually be there. I mean, it's a much more complicated question than simply saying, well, let's do this and everything else will remain equal.
Yeah, somebody put it to me, you can't go to a big fancy dinner and then kick out the rich guy. You still have to pay the bill. They need that. They still need that money that he's raising for them. Michael, I was struck in the interview with Donald Trump when you asked about Black and Latino voters. His answer is it seemed like he said basically all I can do is tell the truth. In other words, he's going to run his campaign. There's not going to be like a special outreach. What's your sense of this? We talked about wanting to know his gut, but the stuff you have to do to win a campaign.
Right. It was this big shift from during the primaries. We've asked him about that same voting bloc last year, and he was very confident because he would always say, I'm winning Republican Hispanics in Nevada. He would always cite this one Nevada poll. It's clearly not happening. It's clearly not working. And I think that answer, it was sort of a rare moment of modesty from Trump, is sort of he's coming to acknowledge this. Now, I think we're saying all these things about how he's in trouble. The polls show the seeds of how he could at least narrow this margin. In your battleground poll in Florida, less than a third of people said he had the temperament to be president, which is a terrible number, but he's still winning on fixing the economy. He's still winning on change. If he can focus the conversation away from himself and his own fitness for office, there's a real path here for him to at least narrow.
And Audie, on that point, are we in the press kind of going overboard on the Trump hyperbole, which is to say when he says, Obama was the founder of ISIS, does he have less room to be hyperbolic than other candidates who say things that are totally hyperbolic and nobody takes them that seriously, but he's
Right.
being fact checked? I mean,
No, I've been thinking about this week because I think we are cranking up the outrage machine at a rapid pace. And the thing about Trump that I maybe disagree with Dan a little bit is that when he says something, right, that people say is controversial, he now forces everyone to repeat the falsehood, to quote unquote fact check it, to normalize and contextualize it for him, right? You see a lot of kind of conversations that say, well, what you really meant was this and that. And he can kind of say, no, maybe, just kidding. The media is doing all the work of explaining things for him and normalizing some things that might in another context be considered socially unacceptable.
And I think it's deeper than just gaffes. He's not showing
Also, gaffes are like unintentional.
Right. Well, but he's not showing empathy. When someone opposes him, he has to degrade them. He has to dehumanize them. That when you go after Gold Star families, when you go after a judge, a judge in your case, that's different than going after Jeb Bush. Okay. It shows that you lack empathy, and that I think is a real problem for him. He has based his life on the notion that not to be a loser. He now is facing the prospect of being one of the biggest losers in American history. I don't know how he adjusts to that. We have not seen how he adjusts to that. It could be a major factor.
The danger is that he adjusts to it by saying the whole process was rigged and then afterwards delegitimizing the democratic process, which could be really hazardous for the country.
well, that's right, Dan. He mentioned when he was in Pennsylvania, he said if the only way it would be the case that he would lose Pennsylvania is if the system was been rigged. This is a state a Republican hasn't won since 1988.
Right. It is a dangerous step that he's taking, and I'm sure there are people who are saying to him, "Do not do that." I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but it would not shock me that Reince Priebus, in their constant conversations, is saying, "Don't go there, don't do that." But it is a risky strategy, as Michael said, to, in a sense, delegitimize in advance the outcome of an election in which you may be on the losing side.
Michael, Gerson, well, let's talk about Hillary Clinton for a minute. Everybody's been saying that there is things that Donald Trump could be talking about with Hillary Clinton, and there were some more emails this week that showed a cozy relationship between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department.
Well, there's a significant portion of her support that doesn't think she's honest and trustworthy. I mean, when you look at these numbers, that is a vulnerability. She's a vulnerable candidate. We could have a WikiLeaks, something damaging come out. We could have a U.S. attorney do something in these cases. There are a lot of factors out here, but she is the luckiest politician in the world to face the opposition she has because she's not a great candidate. She does have significant vulnerabilities. I think Republicans are kicking themselves in this circumstance because they know they could have a competitive race at this point.
What did you make of the emails, Audie?
Well, I think it's interesting. There's both candidates are struggling with something, which is that there's a difference between commanding media attention and controlling it. Ask Kanye West and Taylor Swift. Like you think you can have people on your idea of what the narrative will be, and that will change on you pretty swiftly. You'll face a backlash pretty swiftly. And I think with Clinton, sometimes things that fly out of her mouth fit a narrative that people already have, her doubters already have, which is, can I trust you? Or does it seem like every time you say something, I need to go back and check, do a line-by-line copy edit to figure out, to parse it out. And it's the opposite with Trump. I think in the era of tabloid media, people know what a loose cannon looks like, right? And so if he says things that fit the narrative of a person who can't control themselves, that's something voters can recognize even if they think the media is biased.
Dan, a White House veteran made a point to me about Hillary Clinton and her difficulty with communicating. It's not just about the campaign. When she governs, if she's not doing the press conference, if she has these difficulties, that'll have an effect on her ability to communicate with the country.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that the way she has conducted herself in some of those ways in this campaign will make her ability to govern all the more difficult if she becomes the president. An inability to acknowledge and admit a real mistake is clearly part of her character.
All right, thanks to all of you. We're going to have to leave it there. We'll be right back.